Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of True DataOps. I'm your host, Keith Belanger, Field CTO and DataOps.live. Excuse me, at DataOps.live and Snowflake Data Superhero. Each episode this year, we are exploring how DataOps is transforming the way organizations deliver trusted and governed AI ready data. And if you've missed any of our past episodes, you can always go on to our DataOps.live YouTube channel, subscribe, and be notified for any upcoming episode. Today, I'm really excited. I have my guest today, Ronald Steelman, who is the author Mastering Snowflake DataOps with DataOps.live and Mastering Snowflake SQL API. Welcome to the show, Ronnie.
Hey Keith, great to be here.
Yes, I'm excited. Um, you did a few months back. I did get to see that you have this new book, and I'm really looking forward to getting that in a little bit deeper into that with you. But before that, why don't you give a little bit of everybody a little bit of a background on like who you are and kind of your experience in the industry?
Yeah, definitely. So Ronny Steelman, I've been working with data analytics AI for going on 21 years now. Really, this all started as I was in consulting back in 2018 and got introduced to Snowflake. And at the time, we were a Salesforce consulting firm and we did a lot of data integrations, and Snowflake became kind of like that cloud go-to for Salesforce customers. And so um, fell in love with Snowflake, for lack of a better way to phrase it. And then as I just got more involved with the platform and the technology and all the great things they were doing, I decided to just become an author for the platform. And so my first book, Mastering the Snowflake SQL API, was really born from that juxtaposition between being an engineer but also being a data person, and being able to build applications that could have a number of ways of integrating into Snowflake. And having that engineering background, DevOps was really important. So I've been a customer and an implementer of DataOps.live a number of times. And so it just made sense that that next iteration of my journey as an author was to now focus on how DataOps and Snowflake, taking those DevOps principles and how you can flip them to, supporting data instead of engineering and development.
Yeah, and I can definitely appreciate your take on the love for Snowflake. I've been in this business for a little bit longer, for close to 30 years, and when I was first introduced to Snowflake, I kind of had that like, oh, where have you been my career? Because it finally felt like a solution that fit what the data warehouse practitioner really needed and the problems we felt with. So your new book, Mastering Snowflake DataOps with DataOps.live, an end-to-end guide to the modern data management, which perfect timing with today is that it's actually being released, what, in 2 days on the 21st?
Yes, on the 21st. So you can pre-order it on Amazon now. They've got a special pre-order discount that you can take advantage of. We've done all the negotiations, so you should be able to get 2 day shipping for all you Prime members out there. And we're really excited to, hear what people think about the book.
Yeah, and you briefly touched upon it in the intro, but I want to kind of come back to it. What inspired you to for like, hey, there's a gap in the industry. There's like, I need to write this book. Tell a little bit about the background, how it came to you writing this book.
Yeah. So again, when I was in consulting and we were doing Salesforce consulting and data, one of the big things that we did was took DevOps and flipped that into um, Salesforce DevOps. And we built a tool from the ground up. I had experience building, DevOps type tools when I was with IBM. And then I ended up transitioning over to a company from consulting that did nothing but DevOps for Salesforce, and just seeing how DevOps in the engineering world and DevOps in the Salesforce world just really built trust in the development process. I started diving deeper into how can those same principles be applied to build trust in your data process, your data pipelines, your data architecture, your data governance. And through that journey, I discovered, the DataOps.live platform, fell in love with it. This is not a hard sell. This is just me being passionate about something. But there's just so much out there. Data ops is new. People understand DevOps, but they don't understand how data ops fits into that whole, development life cycle, and it is different. And there's some blog posts and people doing some great things, but there's just not really that comprehensive go-to of what is data ops. And okay, now I understand data ops. Where do I start?
Right. Right. And I can put a little bit of my own experience into this. So, you know, my first journey into Snowflake, I was the senior architect at a Fortune 100 insurance company, and um, we identified. I'm going to say we called it core services because I was a data guy, I wasn't a DevOps person, and we said, hey, how are we going to deploy our stuff? How are we going to do, all of our infrastructure as code? Like all these things became requirements. We as a team spent like, at least I want to say 3 months kind of hacking together something good enough, right, to get by. And then same with me. A few years later, when I was consulting, I was introduced to DataOps.live, and I was like, oh wow, this was fantastic. So I can definitely appreciate, because I have been there, and a lot of data organizations like myself, we're data people, not DevOps people, right? And those practices are foreign to a lot of data teams.
Yeah, definitely.
So in the forward, you had it mentions in the book that a panoramic overview and a microscopic examination. How do you balance strategy and the tech and deep technical content?
Um, definitely, definitely a challenge for sure. Because especially, someone that likes to be hands-on, you can really nerd out on this kind of stuff. But then I wanted to make sure that the book was a great fit for people that aren't hands-on but are maybe decision makers, thinking like your head of data or your chief data officer or chief technology officer. How can they pick up this book and see the value of what they could bring to their team and to their organization, while at the same time catching those people that are boots on the ground? And so, in this book, what I did is I kind of broke it into parts. And so your first part is very much talking about just data ops as a concept. Your second part is talking about the core concepts and technologies of data ops. So, DBT and Git and all of those things. And then in the final part, that's where we dive into the DataOps.live platform and how a single platform can cohesively bring all of this together and really alleviate a lot of the pain points of the build it yourself approach.
Yeah, you talked about like the earlier in the chapters, and what your focus is on. And one thing I loved that was in there was like data ops as that bridge between data engineering and operations, right? And then also you kind of see that evolving in the Snowflake ecosystem as well, right? What's your take there?
We do. So, I mean, if you dive into DataOps, it's definitely code based, but then it's also data, related as well. So, we're not just moving code from lower environments to upper environments. We're moving data from lower to upper environments, and we're testing every step of the way. It's continuous. It's always repeatable, and what we're seeing in the Snowflake world is their introduction of things like integrated DBT, Snowflake Horizon. We've got streams for pipelines within Snowflake. We've got Streamlit apps now. So there's just so much that Snowflake itself is bringing into their world that kind of bridges those gaps. That having this tool that doesn't necessarily replace that, but can sit on top and enhance it, that's kind of what we were talking about when we're talking about bridging that engineering and operations gap, because Snowflake is so much more than just data. It's your data catalog. It can serve so many things in one ecosystem.
Yeah, and even why I think they've moved away from being the data warehouse platform right now. They consider themselves the AI data cloud.
Mhm.
It's interesting. You talk about the amount of parts and pieces. I think a couple weeks ago or last week, I don't remember now. From a time perspective, was Snowflake build, and I unofficially counted between new capabilities and enhancements to existing capabilities around 40 new things that were discussed, talked about at build. And to your point was, how does an organization manage all of that within Snowflake, like you said, with trust and everything and thing like that. It's crazy.
Right. Yeah, and
um
Snowflake is constantly,
yeah.
constantly rolling out new things. And as an author, that's one thing that I struggle with is writing in such a way that by the time you get through writing and editing and the publishing process and all that stuff, that what you're putting on the shelf is, is still
Valid.
relevant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So one of the important aspects of, I know there's many parts to data ops, but one of the, I call it the foundational aspect, right, which is like CI/CD and automation and collaboration for organizations. Where do you see of many organizations struggling in that space?
Um, I mean, the struggle itself, I think, is with understanding what data ops is and why it's important. As far as like that struggle to start taking that first step, it literally comes down to execution. The first step into anything new, I mean, it's a fundamental shift in your paradigm and way of thinking. That first shift is scary, and I think a lot of companies strive to get to perfection before they layer CI/CD in. They want the perfect architecture, the perfect data, and what they don't realize is that CI/CD is what helps you get to that perfection. So it doesn't matter where you are in your journey, it never hurts to just take that first step off the cliff, get CI/CD in place, and then watch as that ideal data environment, whatever you're building, watch as it just accelerates towards that goal of what you see as like the golden standard.
Yeah, it's interesting because I can remember being in scenarios where it's like, Keith, just get it into production, just get it into production. But then after that would be the speed, I'm going to say, that you would need for to be able to iterate and get it back into production as you have to make changes and new requirements come in, that before you know it, it's hard to go back, right,
Yeah.
and implement it. And then you're reliant on, Bob in the corner hitting the button every time you're trying to get it. And in today's day, you can't just release once a week. You need to
Mhm.
be releasing almost hourly, at least daily at the rate we are going today.
Yeah, and I would say that companies, honestly, companies that are more focused right now on improving their architecture, improving the quality of their data, improving the trust, they're doing a lot of development and a lot of change. So that's a great time to bring in CI/CD. Whereas companies that feel like they've reached that perfected state, that's when that you give it a little more thought to. You walk through it because you don't want to break any of that perfection. And I think a tool like DataOps.live, where a lot of that stuff can be a lift and shift into the process without having to go back and do a lot of manual stuff. I think that's what makes a tool like this so helpful, because at any stage in your journey, it's almost literally plug and play.
Yeah, that's a great transition to my next question, because I've been in organizations for you who, many companies, DevOps is not a new anything new. Their development, their application people, that's pretty well been ingrained for a long time. And I found that, well, why don't you just use these DevOps solutions? Why don't you just, adopt these? What does DataOps.live bring to the table that other DevOps solutions that are out there don't, and why people would want to use that instead of other things that many application developers have been using for years?
Yeah, so, and we talk about that in the book. It's very important to distinguish that while DevOps and DataOps share a lot of the same underlying principles, the paradigm is completely different. And in DevOps, you're moving code, but in data, you're moving code and moving data, and the process is just so different. And I think that if you try to use traditional DevOps tools, you're trying to square peg round hole the whole solution, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. Now there are solutions that are either DevOps in root that have been flipped to support DataOps and things like that. But again, what you get with the DataOps.live platform that I really like is you get the cohesiveness. Everything is in one tool. A lot of it's out of the box. I've definitely built DataOps processes that I have to manually script GitHub actions, and I find myself reinventing the wheel. And there's just so much that a unified platform can bring to the table in terms of time, money, effort. I mean, all the things that a lot of companies don't really pay attention to, but They should, because your bottom line isn't just impacted by how much money you make, it's also impacted by how much money you can save.
Yeah. And into my next question, or maybe this is going to be more of a statement, and from my experience, is that your business consumer does not want to hear that, well, it's going to take me a couple days to deploy this or release this into production, right?
Right.
That's really where, um, you know, the features that it brings, like automation, real-time monitoring, and that integration really come into play, right?
Mhm. Yeah. And one of the things that, we always talk about when we talk about data ops is not it's not just the trust that you bring to your data and your infrastructure, it's also the turnaround time. One of the key components I hit on when people are like, why do we need some kind of data ops solution in our environment? My number one go-to is that time to completion, that time to production. It drops dramatically. Would you rather spend 3 weeks manually testing and doing all this stuff and then hope that what you did in test works exactly the same way in production? Or would you rather spend a couple days doing all of this? The testing is continuous while you're going, and then when you're ready to production, you click a button, and if it worked in test, it's working 100% the same way in production.
Yeah, and one of the things I also like is that, many organizations are working on kind of like disparate agile teams, maybe in different domains, and being able to sit here and say, I know that team A and team Z, that testing was done the same way. My
Yeah,
critical tests were done the same way, the whole federated governance aspect of it, right?
exactly.
So, for the reader, what are some aha moments that they might experience when they realize that DataOps.live can automate a lot of the stuff we're talking about?
Yeah, so I think that in my experience, when I talk to people about DataOps.live as a platform, one of the things they focus in on is why don't I just go get DBT Core? Or why don't I just go get DBT Cloud? And so I have to pull them back and be like, yes, DBT is very fundamental to data ops and it's a great tool and it's baked into the platform, but the platform itself brings so much more. For me, like the Soul engine gives you infrastructure as a code. DBT just doesn't really support infrastructure as a code, being able to manage your databases and your schemas, and then dive into the DBT piece and manage your models. Access and control, RBAC policies, all of that can be managed, and being able to quickly adjust roles, quickly adjust users, roll that kind of stuff out, and just know that it's working the way that you intended. That's amazing. And then because everything is in YAML, governance. Like right now, we're seeing with especially like with Horizon and Snowflake, we're seeing the rise of data catalogs. Data.world just got bought, and now they're merging into a larger organization. And as we see data catalogs coming on the rise, your data catalog is only as good as the metadata associated with Snowflake. And I think that a tool like DataOps.live and the Soul engine and those types of things, those really help roll out metadata at the same time that you're rolling out everything else. It's not an afterthought.
Yeah, and to your point, says the Snowflake growth and the amount of stuff in Snowflake that you want to manage. Just for example, this past week, Snowflake launched Snowflake Intelligence, right? And we were a launch partner with Snowflake Intelligence. And I was actually having a conversation with people at Snowflake recently, and you know. and that's more stuff for people to organize. How do you manage the semantics? How do you manage the agents? They need to be tested. They need to be deployed. They need to be just as much as a table or a dynamic table or a view. And so the amount of capabilities that you need to manage as code in Snowflake is exponential at this point, and it's even growing even more.
It really is, yes. And so, I just can't harp enough on having a unified place where you can do all of that and you can see the entire ecosystem together. It's just great. Like I have, again, going back, I've definitely done this type of solution outside of the DataOps.live platform, and having to jump between DBT Cloud and then jump into GitHub and then jump into Airflow. You're jumping all over the place and trying to keep the big picture in your head, and it makes it so much harder whenever you're doing that.
Absolutely. And then soon we got to get you introduced to Metis, our AI, data engineering helper, so to even help you, even accelerate a lot of those things with inside DataOps.live. So let's kind of talk about what's really hot in the industry today, which is AI, right? And a lot of focus, especially on ourselves, is this what we're calling AI ready data, right? So, in your first chapter, you talked about DataOps principles to AI and ML pipelines. How do you see DataOps enabling AI ready data?
The biggest thing for AI ready data that a lot of companies don't understand is not volume of data. It's clean, trustworthy data. And when you implement something like CI/CD, you have that trust that your data is clean. You know where it's at. You know where it's going. I think one of my favorite features in DataOps.live, honestly, and this maybe coming from my DevOps background, is the zero copy clone capabilities that I can branch, Git, and spin up a Spot sandbox that's all mine, and I can do whatever I want in it. I can test it. I can send it off to whoever is running merges and tell them that it's ready to be merged. They can merge it to dev. We can let it run for a few hours, run for a day. We can merge it to QA or UAT. Let our users go in, make sure that nothing broke from a user perspective, and then push it on up to production. And every step of the way, I know that what I've built is trustworthy. I have trust in the process. And if you don't trust your data, you're not going to have good AI ready data.
Yeah, I'm going to second your perspective on zero copy clone. I think it is the most underappreciated capability in Snowflake. The first time I saw it, I'm like, this can't be true, right? And I did everything I could to try to like break it, and I'm like, this is you know black magic. I don't know how
Yeah.
they're doing this, but it is amazing. And I think you kind of touched upon it. But if you could summarize, the one thing many organizations are going into that AI world and they're running down as fast as they can. But if you could say, if anything, to prepare themselves and prepare their data for AI, what would you give them for kind of like your opinion on really what they need to focus on?
Trust. I mean, I everything I do in the data world, I follow the 80/20 rule, except when it comes to AI, and then I follow the 90/10 rule. And but I always put in a little bit of skepticism, a healthy amount that says, listen, like I can't tell you how many times I've preached that your data will never be 100%. If you're striving for 100%, you're just never going to get there. It's just data changes too much. You've got the human component, the data that's coming in. You never know what someone's putting into a field. You never know if developers are putting in, field checking or quality checks at that layer. So you're never going to be 100%. If you can get 90 to 95% trust in your data, I think you're AI ready. And I think that's probably the most important thing is just having that trust.
Yeah, if your consumer, which in the end, I heard this from I don't remember who exactly was, but it always stuck. I don't remember if it was Bill Inman or if it was Dan Linstead. It was one of them. But you know, we do what we do because of our business, right? If it wasn't for our business customers, we wouldn't have a reason to be here. And so, to your point, if your customers can't trust what you're doing and what you're giving them for data, then you're not really doing your job effectively. Um,
100%. I mean, like, can you imagine going to the CEO and reporting sales numbers that are completely inaccurate because something was wrong, like the pipeline data was wrong, like their sales pipeline data was not fully up to date, and now you've got a VP of sales sitting there trying to explain why an Excel spreadsheet that the CEO is still running on the side doesn't match up to his pretty graphs and reports, and where does that fall? He doesn't want to take the fall, so he's coming back to the data team being like, "What did you guys do?"
Yep. Oh, I have some horror stories. Speaking of the Excel, I saw a horror. I had a horror story because somebody didn't get the precision setting on an Excel spreadsheet set properly, and the numbers were wrong. But we could probably do a whole nother episode on horror stories. um, so kind of bringing it back to the book. What was the biggest challenge you faced? When writing the book.
Making it a dual source of knowledge, I would say. I really, really wanted to convey what data ops is because whether you go with DataOps.live or not, whether you trust what I'm saying, whether you trust what you're saying, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. DataOps is still important in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And so how can the book reach that audience to convey that? But then also, how can we showcase a tool that can bring all of these concepts and processes together? And so I think that was the biggest challenge, because so many times I wanted to focus way more on the technology. And again, putting on my nerd hat, that's where I really wanted to put all the focus at. And I had to pull back and be like, no, you need to focus on the methodology as well. You need to, the true data op pillars, that we talk about. All of those things need to be conveyed. And so it was that balance of not being too technical, or just not making this a book that was just like trying to sell a platform, and instead making this a book that was educating the audience.
Yeah, and to your point, the importance of data ops as a practice is definitely growing. When you've got organizations like Gartner and even ISG, and they have categories now around data ops, and even Gartner saying, how importance of data ops as a practice, right,
Mhm.
needs to be within organizations, and organizations that are not adopting data ops practices, and their percentage of failure because they don't implement these practices. So I can definitely appreciate what you said there.
Yeah.
So if you could take one takeaway and the hope what your readers could walk away with when they finish reading the book, which I know it's probably not a book where you read, from chapter one to chapter two, but
Which you
like a
should. You
novel.
should. I've laid it out that way. I've laid it out that way. You should.
um, what do you hope they take away from that when they walk away?
That they need data ops in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Yes, the second half of the book focuses on the DataOps.live platform. I would be remiss not to talk about a tool that can bring a lot of this together. But at the end of the day, data ops is something I feel is going to be critical as data and AI and machine learning evolve. We're already seeing ML ops as an example. And how can you have good ML ops if you don't have good data ops? So that's what I hope they take away. I mean, again, great tool, but if you don't use the tool, at least use the methodology, the processes that are there.
Yeah.
And that's what I want people to really understand. And so that's why the book is laid out the way that it is.
Yeah. So I know we've been flashing up on the screen for those of you who are you've been listening and watching us on the book. But where are other places people can learn more about you and your book and your other books as well?
Yeah. So the Amazon link that keeps coming up, you can click the little author link on there, and it'll take you to my other book. And I've got another book that's in the works, so it'll be there eventually. You can find me on LinkedIn. I think those are probably the two biggest. I do some blogging on medium.com. So you can go catch some of my blog posts there. But I think that LinkedIn and the author page on Amazon are probably the two best places.
Yeah, and for those of you who are watching this right now, we will be adding, or the links should be in the comments below for where you can reach and get the books yourself, or follow Ronnie on LinkedIn and on Medium. So Ronnie, I want to take the time to thank you for joining me. Congratulate you on the new book.
Thank you.
Hopefully, in a couple of days, the launch goes very well. And yeah, and I think the DataOps community in general, appreciates the resource that you provided to us.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you for, having me here, having me on the show. I am really excited about this resource, and I'm, like I said, already thinking through, what does that next iteration look like? And DataOps.live is doing so many great things. I kind of already feel that I'm going to have to probably write a part two to this book just to keep up with what you guys are rolling out.
We're just looking out for you, right? How can we keep you busy? So we got to keep up with. It's funny you say that. It's just keeping up with Snowflake, right? From our perspective, it's like the industry as a whole is just is accelerating so fast. It's getting to the point it's hard to keep up. But again,
Yeah.
thank you for joining me. Well, everybody, so next time on our next episode, we will continue our journey toward AI ready data. We'll feature more practitioners and thought leaders in the industry who are making data ops real inside their organizations. Until next time.